Hello, listeners. I am your host, Joseph of The Radical Disciple. With Pastor John Stott's book, The Radical Disciple, we have been exploring the necessary characteristics of a disciple of Jesus Christ. Today, we will consider dependence. We sometimes hear how in Japan, people do their best to not inconvenience others with their problems. This general tendency applies to even their family members, in that they avoid asking for help from members of their own family. A surprising 33% of Japanese people are reportedly planning to be alone when their lifetime comes, so as not to be a burden to their family members. Such tendency for not wanting to ask for help is not confined only to those in Japan. Many others outside Japan and other parts of the world share that same tendency. They often say that they do not want to be a burden to their families, even when they are old and not able to take care of themselves. If we consider this tendency more deeply, when they say that they do not want to be a burden to others, they are actually saying that they want to be in charge of their own lives. They reject the situation where they must depend on others. Why do you think we are so reluctant to depend on others? Maybe it is because we equate needing help with being useless? However, this point of view is far from what the Bible teaches us. In chapter 7 of this book, John Stott considers the next characteristic of a disciple, and that is dependence. While dependence is viewed negatively by many, Stott argues that rejection of dependence or avoidance of asking others for help is a sign of immaturity. This is in the stark contrast to the common belief that regards not being dependent on others as a sign of maturity. Why is that? Stott quotes John Wyatt. God's design for our life is that we should be dependent. If we look back at the very beginning, when sin first entered the world, we might begin to understand what John Wyatt was trying to say. God created everything, and he intended Adam and Eve to enjoy it all while being in a relationship with him. Adam and Eve were created to be dependent on God. However, they wanted to be independent and to be self-sufficient like God. The fact of the matter is that this is simply impossible. We are created by God, so we are meant to belong to him. Our life comes from him, so apart from him, we cannot exist. The only being who can exist independently is God. He is the only one who exists without relying on anyone else. In contrast, all of God's creation must depend on their creator. Therefore, John Wyatt is right when he stated God's will for us is to become entirely dependent on him. Stott asserts that we are sinners who must rely on God's mercy and his everlasting grace. So the attempt to be independent and live without God is precisely what sin is. Stott uses Jesus' birthday by Mary as an example to demonstrate that it is right for all of us to depend on others. Jesus, the Almighty God, was born a baby that needed to be fed by his mother and even needed his bottom to be wiped by someone else. He showed through his birth men must depend on others. It is natural for us to need others' help. When Jesus died on the cross, he had to be taken down and laid down in the tomb by others. Stott argues our desire for independence or self-sufficiency is not what God intended for us. This is why Jesus, the Son of God, who is undeniably self-sufficient and needs no one's help, came to earth as a helpless baby and died helplessly on the cross. If God of the universe demonstrated dependence, we can certainly be dependent. Still, we often feel humiliated when we must ask others for help. If we cannot take care of our basic needs on our own, we feel deeply inadequate. However, spiritually, we are all dependent on God's grace. No one can reach salvation or carry on with life without God's help. Dependence is not humiliating, but a blessing to receive God's grace. Stott encourages us to embrace dependence and even humiliation. Those who believe they can live on their own without depending on others may not fully appreciate God's grace. They think if God helps them, it would be great, but even when God's not, they can still get by. What about you? Are you relying on God? Are you relying on other Christians to help you with your weaknesses? This does not mean we should always be receiving help from others. We should also help others as well. Both giving and receiving help is a biblical way of living. By helping others with what we have and accepting help from others in our weaknesses, we grow together in faith. This is not humiliating, but a testament to our humility. It keeps us from becoming prideful. Galatians 6:2 says, "Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ." I hope you will see that being a burden to others is not something to be ashamed of, but rather it is a part of God's design. Carrying each other's burdens is how we fulfill Christ's law of love. I'm not saying that we should always be dependent on others, because there are certainly areas where we should be self-reliant. But there are also areas where we should depend on others. I hope we can all become Christ's disciples who stand on our own 2 feet when we should, rely on others when we need to, and carry burdens of other Christians when we are called to. Goodbye for now.